Ask a Pilot has gone abroad. Steve, where are we?
We're in sunny southwest Florida on the Gulf Coast.
And Steve, just for someone that doesn't know you, what is your flying background?
I'm originally from Canada, born and raised. I have a Canadian ATP. That's where I started my professional flying, obviously as a flight instructor. And from there, I moved on to IR aircraft, multi-engine. From there, my first job after instructing was on a King Air 90, 100, 200 for a charter company, as well as air ambulance with the Ministry of Transport. From there, I went on to Learjet 45s and made the decision to move to the UK. I already had a work visa because of my mom's heritage. Converted from my Canadian license to, at that time, it was the CAA. I understand it's back to the CAA now. And then I worked in the UK for what's now called TUI. Back then it was Thompson Fly, flying the 737. Our line training was done out of Germany for approximately 6 months. And I took a little hiatus out of aviation due to my dad's health, and then I went back and worked for jet2.com. Currently, I now live in the States. I've been here since December of 16. I converted my license from my Canadian license, so I have also an FAA ATP. And here I am, as you would call it in Europe, a TRI, type rating instructor. Here it's called air carrier flight instructor through the FAA, and I teach new people coming into our airline.
What are the main differences between flying in Europe and in the US?
The main difference is that in the US, you're going to look at a commuting lifestyle, most likely, unless you're willing to move to a city that has a pilot base and it's the company you want. But most people over here commute, and we can get into that later, how they commute and why they commute. And the other one is that in the UK, a lot of the models are out and backs, as we call them over here now. Which, obviously you leave Manchester, for instance, go to somewhere in Portugal, come home. Here, you're usually on a 4-day pairing, so you can be gone for 3-4 days, depending on the type of operation that you're flying, sometimes longer, up to 18 days.
What would you wish that you had known before you came to the US?
The commuting lifestyle.
The commuting lifestyle.
Yeah, because that can be very difficult when you're used to being home every night.
Yeah.
Just getting used to being away from home, different crews all the time. The other thing too, obviously, and I should have known coming from Canada, but you get so used to the European lifestyle is we don't have the holidays here.
What do you mean we don't have holidays?
Well, our holiday vacation, sorry, they mean different things in the different countries, but basically when you start with a company here, you're looking at your first year, you get a week off.
A week?
1 week.
A week's leave?
Yeah, and then for a lot of companies up till the 8th, 9th, 10th year, depending, you could only get 2 weeks.
Okay.
Whereas in the UK, you start with certain companies, you may get 4 or 6 weeks to start.
But how many days off do you have in a typical month then?
Most companies right now over here are going to 12 days off a month.
Okay.
Some are at 11, but because of the pilot shortage that's going on over here right now, terms and conditions have had to be improved. Otherwise, the retention of pilots, it would be even worse.
What would you say is working as a pilot in the US is like? I mean, is it a hard lifestyle, you think?
The entire American dream that everybody's heard of is to come to the US and work hard.
Yeah.
So you can expect to work hard. If you went to a company like Southwest Airlines, you would be working very hard, up to 6 segments a day.
So segments, flights from somewhere to somewhere,
Yes.
and then, But in your view, is there a shortage of pilots in the US?
It would how you measure the metric. So just because a pilot becomes licensed doesn't mean that that pilot is going to carry on in the aviation industry. There's a lot of people having a second career in this country, so they're entering aviation at 55 years old, never having flown jets. So those people, the attrition is higher because they don't have the experience.
Why do people start so late in life, do you think?
It's been a dream of theirs for quite a long time. So now, because the wages are going up considerably here, they're not going to pay the wages higher if there's no shortage. It's all to do with supply and demand.
Are you able to say what the sort of typical pilot salary is like in the US?
First officer, year one here would be approximately now 90 an hour. You are paid a min guarantee. The min guarantee, depending on the airline and who you're with, could be 70 hours or 75 hours a month. If you only did 40 hours that month because you kept bidding reserve and last call out, then you still get paid your 75.
That's $6,300 a month.
Yes. And that doesn't include any of the startup bonuses. So when you get hired by a lot of the regionals now, you're going to be walking in there with some type of bonus to start just for showing up to class.
Okay.
If you fly over your main guarantee, then obviously you're making more money.
Yeah.
Plus you're looking at per diems paid every hour that you're out of your home base of, again, depending on the company, $1.90 to $2 an hour.
I suppose that if you already have experience, you don't start as a junior pilot, is that right?
We don't have, as they did in the UK, senior first officers,
Okay.
etc., or first officers or second officers.
So let's say someone has 2,000 hours flight experience and come to the US.
They would be hired into the regionals if that's where they went, which is a good stepping stone as a first officer.
So in Europe, where I'm from, we hear stories that pilots over here can earn up towards like $500,000, $700,000 a year. Is that possible in your view?
Yes,
How is that possible?
because there's a pilot shortage.
Okay.
So I keep going on about this pilot shortage. So when you look at the expected retirements at some of the major companies,
Yeah.
whether it be United, Delta, American, there is such a pilot shortage that's going on and is going to keep going on for the foreseeable future. It is cheaper for them to pay pilots than it is to keep having a turnover of pilots. So they'd rather try and keep. The wages to that extent will go up if you're a line check pilot, or as they used to be called, a line check airman. Min guarantee is 75 hours, but some training departments are giving you a min guarantee of nearly double that.
So in Europe, when you move from the right-hand seat, so being a first officer, to becoming a captain, usually the pay goes up about 30 to 40%. Is that the same in the US?
It's even more than that. The best way to figure that out so that people, instead of taking my word for it or your word, is to go on to a website called airlinepilotcentral.com, or if you go on to Google US and
Yeah.
you type in any carrier over here and you put in pilot wages behind it,
Yeah?
then Airline Pilot Central should come up and you can go there and every airline is listed with their wages.
So there's transparency in the pay. You would say I could actually figure out what a Delta pilot or a United pilot earns.
Yes. Now, if you were to look on the Delta site or the United site, they wouldn't say exactly what the pay is. But going on to a website like airlinepilotcentral.com, that I have no affiliation with, by the way, they are very open there about it. And it's usually the pilots of that airline writing in to give any updates.
So, of course, when you're a pilot in Europe, you hope to become a captain one day. And in some airlines, it can happen very fast. And other airlines, you have to wait maybe more than 10 years. What would be the typical prospect for a pilot over here to become a captain? How many years would it take to move from like becoming a first officer and a captain? And what kind of experience level is required to be a captain in the US?
Anytime you're flying airline operations over here, it's called Part 121.
Okay.
You may get a job flying smaller charter aircraft.
Yeah.
That would be Part 135.
So it's regulations that prevent you from
It
going
is-
straight to fly for an airline.
It's regulations, specifically the 1,000 hour rule,
Okay.
that would stop any FO becoming captain in an airline operation before they have 1,000 hours in 121 operation. So it doesn't matter if you've got 10,000 hours flying out of Europe into the United States on a weekly basis, they will not count that as any time towards your 1,000 hours 121 requirement.
Just an example.
Yes.
You have 10,000 hours from an airline.
Yes.
Flying, let's say 6,000 hours as a captain, 4,000 as a first officer. You cannot get a job directly as a captain in the US.
No.
You have to fly a certain amount of hours, the 1,000 hours.
You'll have to have 1,000 hours of 121 experience to fly for an airline here as a captain.
Okay.
And that is the minimum requirement.
How long time would it take for someone to progress from being a first officer to a captain?
Depending on their background and how much time they have and experience, once they get the 1,000 hours, they're going into upgrade training.
But that could be
It
one and
could
a half
be
year?
1.5 years.
If you were to give some advice to someone being in Europe that wants to maybe follow their dream of becoming a pilot in the US, what would your advice be to them right now?
Obviously, the United States is quite restrictive on who they let in legally.
Yeah.
So with the background checks that are needed, depending on the visa that you're coming in on, like for myself, it was different. I ended up meeting somebody over here while I was living in the UK, and I came over on a fiance visa,
Okay.
which even the process of it took 8-9 months.
Yeah.
But once it got rolling, it happened very quickly.
Called EB2 NIW,
Right.
something like a national interest waiver system. How does that work?
They're looking for exceptional ability, I believe, from somebody to see if they would be a good fit in the United States, meaning the American dream, if you want to call it that. They're coming here to live and work hard and not drain the system. So when I came here, for instance, my fiance at the time, who's now my wife, she was my sponsor. And
Yeah.
if I had to claim off the system, whether it be the Social Security system, etc., they could garnish her wages for that.
So it would not be, in your view, be enough to just have the experience that the American airlines are looking for. You also need to have work permit.
Green card is the big one.
Okay.
For that.
Is that
Now,
something like an airline would do for you, or is it something
No.
you need to apply for yourself?
You'd have to apply for it yourself. Airlines will not sponsor you. That's the big thing. If you go on to most airlines' websites here,
Yeah.
that it doesn't say it on the first page, but when you start the application, it will say that you will not need or do not need any sponsorship.
Considering there's a pilot shortage over here at the moment, and maybe there's things suggesting that there isn't the same in the Europe, for someone in Europe that's considering becoming a pilot, would it be possible to go to the US, do the training here, and if they did that, would that bring them closer, in your view, to getting a job?
It will be cheaper, for one, because prices here are cheaper than Europe.
Yeah.
Fuel prices, and that's really what governs a lot of the aircraft these days. But if you went to a school here and they specialize also in EASA, you could come here, do the time here, and write the EASA licenses here. So you would then, I believe, go back to the UK, have to do something over there, and you would have your EASA license.
Okay. What is your favorite aspect of working as a pilot in the US?
Something that you guys will never be used to in Europe.
What?
Free flights, for one.
Free flights, what do you mean?
Free flights. Well, for instance, you work for most major carriers, you will get free flights on that major carrier. So you have a lot of travel benefits. As I said, people don't live in base here. They commute to work.
Yeah.
That is just something that is done here regularly. And it's not just commuting on your airline to work. I could commute on any major carrier and even low costs to get to work. And it's all free.
Can you also use it for holiday or leisure purposes?
Of course you
or?
can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and not just you, your spouse.
What is the least favorite part then of flying in the US?
The lack of days off for holidays.
Yeah.
And I don't mean days off in a month, I mean holiday,
Yeah.
vacation days.
Yeah.
You get so used to Europe getting 4 to 6 weeks to start, you come
Yeah.
here and you start off with a week, which could be 5 days. Now, you don't have to wait the entire year to get your 5 days. They will allow you to have them prorated that you stay there for the year, and if you quit before, then they'll probably take it back in pay, like severance pay when you leave. That would be the least favorite. The other one is you have to be ready to be a commuter here.
Okay.
If you want to live in a place like Florida on the Southwest here, there are really no jobs down here to be based down here. So you're going to have to commute somewhere. Even if I was working for a company out of Miami, for me to get from this side of Florida to Miami, I'm going to have to drive. That's 3 hours.
If I've understood this right, just to manage expectations, let's say someone was in Europe, had the family in Europe, wanted to come to the US to work. It sounds like you only have like 2 weeks of the year where you could actually potentially travel back to see your family.
It gets very caught up in the weeds here. Depending on the company, yes, you're correct in the days, but as you bid for the monthly schedule,
Yeah.
if, for instance, you have a 4-day trip that touches your vacation day, that trip is dropped.
Okay.
So you gain those 4 days as vacation,
Yeah.
and then usually between trips you have 2 to 3 days off, so you will gain those 2 to 3 days on top of that.
So what you're saying is you can actually create in your roster gaps that would allow you to to go home for
Yes.
longer periods of time.
Yes, a lot of airlines as well here have something that we call PBS, preferential bidding system.
Yeah.
So you put into the computer what you want, whether it's early starts, late finishes.
Okay.
You try and tell the computer what you want to make it easier for your
Okay.
commute. Other airlines, you will bid the schedule for the month. So you will see the entire schedule comes out, and depending on your seniority list, would depend on what line you could hold, and they're called line holders here.
Okay. So now you're in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you miss from Europe then, from flying in Europe?
I miss the out and backs. So again, a lot of the airlines here, they don't do out and backs. So whether it was TUI or Jet2 or Ryanair, you do a morning shift, you're back early afternoon. If you're not on the morning shift, that means you're on the afternoon shift and you're back 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I miss that way of flying because I got very used to that way of flying.
Yeah.
To come here and be in a hotel in a different city every day that you're flying took some getting used to.
Yeah.
I was ridiculed and laughed at because of my suitcases. So you have to have the proper luggage
Yeah.
that can fit in the overhead bins.
Yeah.
And again, that's a nice perk because if I was to go fly in a different major than who I work for, we're given a lot of the times preferential seating, and your bags always go with you.
With what you know now, would you still have become a pilot?
Yeah, because it was in me. You know, I've tried to get out of aviation.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Why doesn't it work?
Because it's in my blood.
Okay.
I think any pilot that goes through and becomes an airline transport pilot, it's in their blood. You have to enjoy the job to be able to do it. Now, for myself, I'm a trainer here. I like the training environment. I've fallen back into the ways of when I was a flight instructor.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that. I still fly the line. I fly the line once a month. But I really enjoy seeing somebody that's never flown a jet or has jet experience from another airline, bringing them into the fold and teaching them how to fly our way. That's really
So, but just to sum it up, if someone wants to work in the US, it's not something that's going to happen in a week
No.
or a month. It's more likely to take about a year or longer.
Yes.
I hope you like that. That was just a casual discussion with a good old friend, Steve, aka wife. We tried to cover as many topics as possible. If there's something that you think that you would like to have an answer about and then we haven't talked about, just send us a message and we'll try and get an answer for you. But otherwise, I hope you appreciated the content, and we shall see you next time. Bye.